Hello everyone, welcome to Azura Psych, and before we get into the video for today, I have an announcement and something that I want to talk about real quick. So if you're here just for the content, I will include a timestamp either on screen or in the description box below so you can skip straight to the start of the actual video. So in terms of the announcement, for a long time here on YouTube, I've been doing YouTube more than 2 years now. Occasionally I've wanted to make a video that isn't in line with the branding for this channel. So the Azura Psych YouTube channel is essentially psychology focused. But every now and then, as a person, as a content creator, I have a video that I want to make or something that I want to talk about that isn't strictly related to psychology. And to give an example of this, a few of you may remember a few months ago I started getting into coding, and I made a video on a second channel that I didn't really tell many people about coding, just because I wanted to see if my ideas and my thoughts could stand up on their own outside of the realm of psychology. And funnily enough, that video has 20,000 views and that channel has more than 200 subscribers, and it has like 1 or 2 videos on the channel just where it was me talking about something. That video outperformed any video I've done here on this channel in a while. But that's beside the point. Essentially, I want to have a channel on the side that can be more of a personal channel where I can talk about things that might not be strictly psychology focused. That way I don't have to divert the attention away from this channel in terms of having it still be a psychology channel, because I'm still going to become a psychologist one day. So I'm going to have a lot of things to talk about specifically related to psychology, and I'd like them to kind of be segmented and separated from things that might be closer to personal interests. And just as we talk about today's topic for the video, video games and gamers and their personality and their motivations, I want to talk about things that might be in this realm that might not strictly be psychology related as well. So I'm starting a second channel just called Azura, and it's going to be followed by the katakana for the word Azura as well. And that's just a kind of temporary name for now. It's like a work in progress name. So if you'd like to follow me over there and see maybe some topics or videos that aren't strictly psychology related, you want to follow me more on a personal level, you can check out that channel as well. I will include it in the description box below. But other than that, that's really all I have to say in terms of the announcement. Now we can get into the video. So in line with the announcement of the second channel that I spoke about in the announcement, the kind of other half of this topic is going to be discussed on that channel. I'm doing kind of a little event where you're going to see some of the topic discussed here and some of it discussed there, in case you just might want to see some of the perspective and check out the other channel. So, gamers, gamer motivations, and the personality types of gamers. So if you're not new to this channel, if you've been around a while, when you think of personality type, you're probably going to think of MBTI, Enneagram, these sorts of things. But today we're actually going to be talking about an entirely different system of personality typology, and one that is primarily focused on people who enjoy video games. And essentially it's going to be typing people based on why they enjoy video games. How did you get into video games? What about games is interesting to you? What keeps you playing these games? And there's 9 different types of gamers in this theory, and today I want to talk about what those 9 types are and what essentially is going to cause some people to be excited about and want to keep playing video games. Let's get into it. So this theory is actually created by a company or corporation known as Quantic Foundry. So I personally call it the Quantic Gamer Types. That's actually what they call it on their website as well. So the core theory behind this theory is that there's 12 primary motivations that inspire people to want to play video games or keep them coming back and excited to play a game. And in my other video on the second channel, you'll actually see this is where I'm going to talk specifically about the motivations in detail. In this video, I'm going to be talking about the types, and the other video, I'm going to be talking about the motivations in detail. I'm going to briefly mention what the motivations are so you can have kind of a reference for how the personality types are divided. But if you'd like to learn more in depth about the motivations themselves, check out the second video. So there's 6 primary categories of traits that are each broken down into 2 subtraits that are going to be measured in determining what brings someone to want to play a video game. And these are going to be action, which is subdivided into destruction and excitement, social, which is subdivided into competition and community, mastery, which is subdivided into challenge and strategy, achievement, which is subdivided into completion and power, immersion, which is subdivided into fantasy and story, and creativity, which is subdivided into design and discovery. And the way that these are measured is that it's kind of like Big Five, where it's a percentile score. So you're being measured against a large normative average of the people who have taken the test. I believe they said they had over 100,000 people who have taken this test, so they kind of have a strong norm. And you get a percentile score. So if you score a 30th percentile, it means you're below average in enjoying one of these motivations or having this motivation to play video games. Now, before I actually discuss the 9 types, you can take a free quiz to determine what your type might be through their website, and I will include a link for that down in the description box below. But what I'm going to do now is go over each of the 9 types one by one and explain the scores that are relevant to them in terms of averages. What makes this type different from the other types in terms of how they score. So the first type on the list is going to be what's called the Acrobat. And the description for the Acrobat is that they are solo gamers who primarily want to take on challenging gameplay, and they want to practice over and over again until they can take on the most difficult missions and bosses in the game. When we look at their scores, we can see that the only score on average that they have higher than the other types is challenge. And all of the other scores are below the 50th percentile except for discovery, which is pretty much on the 50th percentile. So these are the types of gamers who want to play games that they can try to master, something that they can repeatedly play over and over again until they feel like they have the skill and reflexes to conquer the game itself. What's different about the Acrobat from some of the other types, and what's noticeable about this type, is that they have a very low social score, and meaning that they don't really care about competing or challenging other players in terms of their mastery, and instead they want to beat the game itself. They want to improve upon their own skills to a point where they feel like they've mastered the game. A good example of Acrobat gamers, in my opinion, would be people who you see doing speedruns or speedrun communities. Essentially, people who are trying to beat a singular game as quickly as possible by playing through it over and over and over again, learning all the small tricks that you can learn to kind of abuse the mechanics of the game to make things go faster. This is going to be representative of the Acrobat, somebody who wants to have that personal self-mastery over the game that they're interacting with, even if it doesn't really involve too many in-depth things like story or community or challenge against other players. The next type of gamer is going to be one that might be familiar to a lot of more casual gamers, and they call it the gardener. Now, the gardener's description is that they are looking for quiet, relaxing, task completion focused games. These are going to be your, again, casual gamers. If you look at their scores, the only one that is above the 50th percentile is completion, and barely so. Essentially, these are the gamers who want to play the type of game where they can relax while they play. Great examples of this type of gamer would be the person who enjoys Animal Crossing, which was huge last year. There's not a lot of actual, heavy, intensive, focused gameplay in these games, and instead it's more so like immersing yourself into another world to relax or feel like you're completing something. You don't essentially want to feel like you're competing while you are doing the completion. So I think the gardener really represents the more so casual gamer, and this is where my wife, for example, would fit into this typology, as she doesn't really tend to enjoy games that require a lot of action, input, or even story at times. She's mainly just interested in the relaxation and fun that can be acquired or had while playing video games. The next type on the list is the Slayer, and Slayers are described as wanting to be the heroic protagonist in a cinematic story. When we look at their score, again, a lot of their scores tend to fall under that 50th percentile, except for fantasy and story. So what do these types really want out of a video game? These are the kinds of people who see video games almost like a movie that they want to interact with. They want to be the main character in a movie. They want to be the person who has all the power, or who can earn all the power, or who gets to experience some sort of story, usually by themselves. They're typically not interested in playing with other people, and you're not going to find them really trying to challenge or compete with others as well. Games that these people might like are going to be strong single-player narrative-focused games. For example, the listings of the games that they have on the site is Tomb Raider, the game series, the Uncharted series, Detroit Become Human, the Walking Dead Telltale series. These are going to be your single-player, cinematic, story-driven gamers. Now we finally get into what I would consider to be one of the more hardcore personality types that you might find in gamers, and this is going to be the skirmisher. And the skirmisher is described as being centered on action social motivations, the cluster of the first four motivations on the top. These are going to be your competitive, community-focused gamers, the ones who are interested primarily in competing with other people for the sake of competition as well as community and excitement while playing the game. They may not be the most driven towards things like story or fantasy, and they might not even care about the setting that they're playing in when it comes to the game. They could care less usually if it's a role-playing game or if it's a shooting game or a sci-fi. For them, it's more so about the community aspects and the challenge that they can receive from that community. You're most often going to find players who are skirmishers in games like Counter-Strike, for example. You might find them in the Battlefield series, maybe even Call of Duty or Rust. These are going to be your players who are primarily focused on the competitive social aspects of gaming at the expense of the other aspects of gaming. Or not even at the expense, but at the ignorance of those other aspects. They're not interested in things like story. This next type is the one that is considered in this system to be the most hardcore of the gaming types, and this is called the Gladiator. And the Gladiators are much more likely to identify as hardcore gamers, and they want games to engage them using a broad spectrum of features. And when you look at the scores of the Gladiator, you can see this in that every single one of their scores is above the 60th percentile, and some of them are even above the 75th percentile. And what this means is that this is your gamer who enjoys pretty much every aspect of gaming. They're going to be there for the community, they're going to be there for the action, they're going to be there for the story, they're going to be there for the challenge, they're going to be there for the design and creativity aspects. This type of gamer is your catch-all when it comes to gaming. Now, this actually, surprisingly, wasn't the type that I scored as, because I'm someone who considers myself a pretty hardcore gamer. But I'll tell you which type I scored as, because it's the next type on this list. But know that the Gladiator is typically going to be the type of gamer who really enjoys almost every single aspect of the games that they are playing, and can find themselves having fun in most games. This next type is actually the one that I scored as personally, and I definitely agree that this is probably the closest to being my type when it comes to gamer motivations. And this is going to be the Ninja. Now, the Ninja is, like Acrobats, care about taking on difficult challenges, but Ninjas also want strategic decision-making, fast pacing, and competition. They see video games as places to test their skills and wits against other players. If we look at the scores for Ninja, you can see that a few of the scores really stand out compared to the other ones, as opposed to the Gladiator, who has pretty much high scores across the board. The Ninja is really high in competition, excitement, strategy, and challenge. They tend to be the ones who are focused on self-skill when it comes to the video games that they're playing. They want to master games and be competitive with other people, unlike the Acrobat, but they're also not inherently interested in the social aspects of games. And you can see this in that despite having a high competition score, which is a subdivision of the social trait, they don't have a high community score. It's very average. And this is something that I agree with as well. I tend to be the type of person who wants to compete in video games, but I'm not there for the social aspects. I like to challenge other players to see if I myself have improved in the process of challenging others. The types of games that ninjas tend to enjoy compared to the other types are usually things like fighting games. They list Street Fighter as a great example, StarCraft, Super Smash Brothers, Defense of the All-Stars, League of Legends, these sorts of games. And these are all games that I've played at some point or another. I personally really love fighting games. I used to go to competitions and play them a lot. I enjoy games that allow me to test myself personally as much as possible. I think a great example of the perfect style of game to me would be Dark Souls. I really love Dark Souls because it's extremely challenging and it allows me to continuously grow my own skill in the game while occasionally allowing me to challenge other players within the realm of the game to see if I actually can hold up in terms of skills. The next type is the cousin of the Slayer type that we talked about earlier, and this is going to be the Bounty Hunter. Where the Slayer wanted an on-rails curated cinematic experience, the Bounty Hunter wants a game world that they can make their own through customization and exploration. When we look at the scores for the Bounty Hunter, you can see that there are a few aspects that really stand out compared to the other. First of all, they have high excitement, destruction, fantasy, story, discovery, and design, but they have very low community, competition, strategy, and challenge. So what does this look like in a gamer? Well, this is typically going to be the kind of person who enjoys power fantasy styles of games. Single-player games that allow them to really ramp up and level up their character, become very strong, maybe even be overpowered compared to the other characters in the game. Examples that they give are going to be games like God of War, Assassin's Creed, the Far Cry series, Mass Effect, and Saints Row. I quite enjoy these types of games as well, and when you take the personality assessment, there's a chance that you might get a subtype for your personality type if your scores are a little bit mixed. And my secondary score was actually Bounty Hunter, because despite the fact that I enjoy competition and competing with other people, I also am really heavily invested in the fantasy genre and role-playing games. So it makes sense that I would score as a ninja primary type with a bounty hunter secondary type. Next up is going to be the architect type. Now, the architect is one that I think is actually quite interesting, but it's also one that I am pretty sure that I'm not. Because the architect wants planning and decision-making that leads to progression and task completion in their games. They also want games with interesting settings and stories. They strongly prefer solo gameplay without teamwork or competition, so they have full control over their gameplay experience. When you look at the scores for the architects, you can clearly see that they are very low in community, competition, excitement, and destruction, but they're quite high in completion and strategy, fantasy, and story. The architect type, much like the name suggests, is typically the type of person who prefers the long-term, more slow-paced, strategy-focused games. A great example of this would be the Civilization series, the Europa Universalis series. I've actually never played that one, but I think it's a lot like Civilization. The Baldur's Gate series, Pillars of Eternity, these sorts of games. There is going to be a lot of strategic decision-making, pausing, stopping, starting, these sorts of things. It's almost like a chess game where there's not going to be a lot of high-octane action. For me, I personally prefer my video games to be kind of moment-to-moment flexive. I like to test my ability to adapt to situations as opposed to the more kind of slow burn process or slow burn enjoyment that you might find in the games like Civilization. I actually used to enjoy Civilization when I was younger, but I found as I got older, my patience for the longer, like 5 or 6 hour session games that you might find with those games just really wasn't holding up. So I think the architect, while really interesting, is one of the types that I really don't think that I personally mesh with. Now, if you're interested in MBTI, you might think that's really interesting because INTJs, I think a lot of other INTJs out there might really mesh with the architect gamer personality type as opposed to someone like me who prefers the ninja style of competition with others through kind of a reflexive based approach. And I completely would understand that because INTJs would certainly have the long-term ability to think in terms of how things might play out in those types of games. My close friend who is an ENTJ, Madshot, who's appeared on this channel before, actually really enjoys the Civilization style games. But just for me, it's not personally what I enjoy. The final type on the list is going to be the Bard. Bards are social players who want to chat and interact with other players in game worlds that are rich with lore, stories, discovery, and customization. I think the epitome of the Bard archetype or type of gamer is actually going to be Final Fantasy XIV, and they list that as one of the examples here as well. MMOs in general, but the special thing about Final Fantasy XIV is that there's a very rich social aspect to that game, and that there's plenty of people who log on and play Final Fantasy XIV without actually playing the game. They're kind of just there for the social interaction, to build houses, to decorate their character, to dress up in different outfits, those sorts of things. You're going to find that the Bard type of gamer really is not interested in things like competition, excitement, destruction, completion, or power. Especially when you look at their scores, you can really see this. But they're really going to be interested in things like fantasy, story, discovery, design, and community. So I really think that the Bard is representative of the true social gamer who sees gaming as a social outlet. So those are the 9 types of gamers that you might find when you are interacting in the video game sphere. Now, of course, there's generally going to be mixing and matching of these types. You're not strictly going to be one. As I mentioned earlier, I scored as a ninja with the subclass of bounty hunter. And you might find after taking the test on the website that maybe you don't 100% agree with the type that they give you, and that's completely fine as well. For some reason, the first time I took it, it gave me the gardener, and I said that must be an error because I really hate completion and slow-paced games, and it put my challenge and mastery scores all the way up at the 98th percentile. And I think it was just because occasionally the test can get confused if you have scores that don't perfectly match and align with the scoring system that they have. So you might have to take it once or twice and think about the answers really specifically and what do you really enjoy and not enjoy in games. But at the end of the day, you can probably just look at these types and get a good idea of which one you might be. So let me know down in the comment section below, what gamer type do you think you are if you are someone who enjoys video games? If you're not someone who enjoys video games, what do you think about this theory? Do you think it's actually something that is quite interesting? If you'd like to learn more about the motivations that I talked about in this video, please go check out my second and new channel where I will discuss in depth the motivations that lead up to these personality types, and I will leave a link to that in the description box below. Other than that, thank you all for watching. Please let me know what you think down in the comment section below. I would like to remind everybody that I do have personality typing sessions available as well as coaching if you'd like to work with me to find out what your personality type is and what that means for you. This has been Asura from Asura Psych. Have a good one.